It was 1945. As many as 127,000 Japanese were living in America, mostly the West. One-third were not natural-born citizens and had no voting rights or say in government. On December 7, 1941, at 7:55 a.m., Oahu in Hawaii was bombed by the Japanese and their 360 planes. 2,400 people were killed, 1,200 were injured, and 200 American planes. President Theodore Roosevelt made a speech the day after the bombing on Pearl Harbor and said, "Yesterday, December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan." He also made an agreement to start war with Japan and had. After the bombing on Pearl Harbor on August 6, 1945, the first atomic bomb ever was dropped on Hiroshima, Japan. 80,000 people died, and a few days later, 10,000 people died from the radiation. The U.S. dropped another atomic bomb on Nagasaki, and 40,000 more people died. Later, Japan surrendered in World War II.
This is what a camp may have looked like to a Japanese American who was just arriving at camp. A row of small, white, identical buildings for as far as the eye could see. Camps were located in remote locations, such as this one in the middle of the desert in Poston, Arizona. This is one camp block. In each, there were 8 camp buildings that each had 4 one-room homes for families. On the ends of these rows were a mess hall and a recreation hall, which can be seen at the bottom left. Between the rows were men's and women's restrooms and a large laundry. The blocks were encircled by barbed wire, keeping internees from any possible escape. Hard work was the main activity at camp. A common job was hauling scrap metal, as shown in this photo. However, the internees did have some free time. This was mostly spent in schools and religious or cultural ceremonies. Some even read a newspaper published by and for internees. Others played games in the recreation hall. After a long day at camp, internees had dinner in the mess hall. Food was not what they were used to, nor was it enough. Guards oversaw and ran the camps. Being a guard at camp was one of the easiest and safest jobs in the military in World War II.
After the Japanese were freed, they basically had nowhere to go. With no money, they were forced to stay in the United States. Some became homeless and others built homes. They were greatly discriminated, and some
internment camps, they were told to pack their bare necessities. They had to sell other possessions or they would be stolen. The Japanese began to lose their homes, businesses, careers, futures, and possessions. Many Japanese, though, tried to deny the internment. One of these people was Gordon Kiyoshi Hirabayashi. He refused to go to the camps in 1943. Later, though, he was convicted by the Supreme Court. Another person was Fred Toyosaburo Korematsu. Fred was born in Oakland, California, and was arrested for resisting Executive Order 9066.
After the Japanese were freed, they basically had nowhere to go. With no money, they were forced to stay in the United States. Some became homeless and others built houses. They were greatly discriminated, and some Americans even burnt down their Japanese homes. All camps were deserted, but their houses were still robbed, and they were left with nothing, not even security. Many court cases associated with the Japanese discrimination even reached the Supreme Court. One particular was the Korematsu v. U.S. Even though Korematsu lost his case, the Congress still apologized to the Japanese. They gave the Japanese more than $1 million so that the Japanese could return home. Some stayed because they were too old, but mostly of them started a new life because they could return to Japan.
Many Americans who didn't even know what Japanese life or culture was like, but were Japanese, were thrown into an internment camp. One man named Fred Korematsu tried to escape these camps. He had done surgery to his eyes, and he then moved to Nevada. He was later arrested and tried in court for not following military orders. Fred Korematsu responded that he was denied his Fifth Amendment due process. On February 25, 1983, the government started compensating Japanese Americans for their hardships in camps. Each survivor that was still alive got paid $20,000. Many other people also sued, and some other major cases included Hirabashi and Kasui versus the United States.
General DeWitt was the man who created the idea of Japanese internment because he saw thousands of American soldiers die at the bombing of Pearl Harbor. DeWitt stated that it was important for reasons of military necessity. When the decision came to President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the internment was called Executive Order 9066. At this time, there was pressure coming from a lot of people, including farmers who wanted to eliminate the Japanese competition, politicians who wanted power, and people who feared the Japanese. President Roosevelt decided to sign it. This order ordered 100,000 people to be removed from their homes and be placed into what was basically a concentration camp. Once they got to the camps, they were watched 24/7 by military guards. There were also guards at the gates, barbed wire fences, and a guard tower about every 200 yards.